I don't know how well you can understand this map. I'm not a big artist, so there's crop fields over here. There's a road over here. This is north. Every place you see on any of my maps where you see all these black X's, that's bedding area. That's going to be some form of brush or thick saplings, or it's going to be tall weeds. Going to be areas where might be some water and some marsh grasses, but that's going to be typically bedding area. That's why I put bedding here. This one here is all kind of bigger trees and a lot of mixed in weeds and brush and deadfalls. This over here behind me, this is a small marsh. So that's got some cattails in it and stuff, and it has an edge. Basically, where you see this red line, which is a deer runway, that is actually a gap between the marsh and more bedding area here. And this bedding area here used to be a lot of tall pines. They were planted about 50 years ago, and they've gotten to the point where they've started to tip over and let a lot of sunlight in. So now that's just full of briars, just really thick, nasty briars, pricker bushes and stuff. So that's the best dense bedding area around here, and it's right in front of me right there. And then this over here, where those briars kind of end, this was a pine plantation basically, and there's an edge to it, and where that ends, then it just goes into more trees and tall weeds and a few cattails, and this is more bedding area. The blue thing here is a river, and right now we are right here. So basically you got this marsh, and it has a defined edge to it, and there's a runway between the marsh and where that pine plantation used to be on a little bit higher ground. So there's a main runway that goes right down through that gap, and it continues and goes down along this river heading north. There's a runway that comes out of this bedding area, and it skirts the north side of this marshy area, because again, there's a defined break right there between trees and weeds and marsh and water. So this runway skirts that edge, and it goes down along the river as well, and actually goes over here where they cross the river. That's a shallow spot in the river where they cross and go out into those crops. So this tree right here, which is this one, as you can see, it's got spikes in it. This is a white oak tree. So this is a destination location for several reasons. Obviously, because it's a white oak, when it has acorns, deer are going to feed here, and it's right in the middle of all this major bedding area. So it's not only a destination spot when it has acorns, it's a destination spot because there's so much stuff going on right here. I call this a terrain feature dump. Basically, deer are going to skirt the edge of the river this way, they're going to skirt the edge of the river this way. This is a different terrain feature than this. This is a different terrain feature than this. And it's just where a lot of different terrain features fall together in this one little, like 20-yard area. So from this white oak tree, there's typically scrapes. There's a scrape right there. We'll look at that in a second. And there's a little tiny beech tree, and usually when this has acorns, there's scrapes under that beech tree. It didn't have acorns last year, so there was no scrapes there, but they still made this. This scrape's here every year, this small scrape here. So again, this is a white oak tree. I'm up it relatively high because this is a spot I only hunt during the rut phases, and I have to get up there pretty high because the foliage is going to be down. If it was an early season spot where I'm going to hunt, first couple days of bow season, it's going to have a lot of leaves in it. I'd have a lot of background cover. I might prep it a little lower, but it's up there at least 25 feet to my feet. Might even be close to 30. But anyway, this is just what I call a terrain feature dump because a lot of stuff comes together right in this one spot, following the rivers, skirting the edge of the marsh between the marsh and the old pine plantation, which is now briars, skirting the edge of the bedding area up here, which is, weeds and trees versus marsh and wet. Just a lot of stuff going on right here. A lot of doe traffic through here because it is a terrain feature dump, and anytime you have doe activity, feeding on the acorns or just moving through this zone, you're going to have scrapes. You will always find scrape areas where there's a lot of concentrated doe activity, like at an apple tree or at a white oak, or where a lot of terrain features, a ridge dumps down into a marsh or something like that. So that's the situation at this tree here. Came back here, don't really have to do a lot of cleaning up. but it's pretty open right here. One thing about primary scrape areas is it's usually in an open zone. So you got dense stuff there, you got dense stuff there, you got dense stuff behind me, you got dense stuff that direction. But yet there's a little opening here, so it's a convergence of runways. Everything kind of funnels through this spot, and it's right on the corner of a river. This is that scrape I was just talking about from the whiteboard. Got a licking branch here, licking branch here. That's been nipped off. That's been nipped off. So there's four licking branches that were utilized last fall. And typically, if you want to follow me, typically this tree right here, this little beech tree, is just perfect for a scrape area. There's typically, when this tree, and there's another white oak over here, when they have acorns, there's a scrape right here. And this just has the perfect height branches to utilize as licking branches. So some years there's 3 or 4 scrapes in this little zone. Last year there was only 1 because there was no acorns. Okay, I just showed you that scrape underneath that tree, and then where there's typically scrapes under that beech. This is just a little bit of letting you see what the scenery's like. Got the curve in the river right here. When you walk over here, just a lot of brush. Right now there's a lot of water in here. Typically it's not quite that wet. We had a lot of water last year. But as you can see, there's cattails in here. This is all marsh grass all up in through there. And back in there where you see all the white, that's timber with weeds, and this is the marsh. So they come down that line between the timber and the cattails because it's a little bit drier. They always put their runways on the dry spot. They don't want to go through the muck if they don't have to. Now we're going to go over here and show you the other side where it's all briars and there's rub lines and everything. All of rub lines, there's a rub line this way, it comes to here, there's a rub line that way, and it comes to here. Typically they're small bucks, but they grow up sometime. Got a rub here. Well, this is a big buck right here. He did this. It's at least 12 inches off the ground. Got a rub here. Being facetious, of course. Basically, there's a rub line right down the edge here where these old pines are, and they're, like I said, they're all tipping over. And back when you get back into here, it's all briars and stuff. I don't know if you can see it from that angle, but that's all just really thick briars, and it doesn't look that thick right now because it's March, but come summer and fall, when the foliage is on those and those grow a little more, that's really, really dense. Okay, I want you to notice when I was talking about the river, how rivers get deeper and shallower. Notice how we're right on that bend. Notice how narrow this river is right here. There's the same amount of water running through here that there is throughout the rest of the river. So anytime it's narrow, it's going to be deeper. Now you walk over here, follow me with the camera. Look how much wider that is right there. I'm only probably 30 yards from where the narrow river is, and it's a lot deeper. But look how wide it is here. This is where I cross. This is where the deer cross. There's 2 or 3 runways out of here, out of there, coming down through here, and they all come and converge, and they cross right here because it's very, very shallow. So keep that in mind when you're following a riverbed. If it's on your property or if it's on public land or whatever it is, kind of watch how deep the river is. And if there's places where you can cross, you know, where the water's shallower, that's the same place the deer are going to cross. I had a good friend of mine on a DIY hunt last year in Iowa. He went out there on his very first hunt. His very first evening, shot a 170-inch 10-point. And he did that exact same thing. He followed the river till he found a place where it was shallow. And when he found that, there was just tons and tons of deer crossings, scrapes, and he saw 135 and 170 inches the very first evening he hunted there, and he shot the 170. Okay, this here's a tree that I've got it tacked because the camera guy's standing in a short crop field right now, or in a crop field. And this is my entry. On one of the other videos I showed I had some trees next to the river back in the swamp on the other side where it's really shallow where they cross. Well, this is my entry to that. So during the years, this is in a short crop field, I'll walk on an evening hunt. I'll walk through the middle of a crop field so I don't spook anything on the edges, because the deer can bed down the edges. And I'll walk directly at this tree with these tacks, and then I just make this short little trip and cross the river there with my hip boots. And my hunting tree is just like 30 yards on the other side of the river. So because that's all bedding area back over into there, I'm not spooking anything with my entry for an evening hunt. On the mornings, I do exactly the opposite. Deer are going to be out in the crop field, so on the mornings, I enter from the backside way before daylight, get in the tree, and then I catch the deer coming back, crossing the river right at the crack of daylight or just after, going back into the bedding area. So I got the tacks here to mark my location so I can easily find it while I'm walking through the field from a distance. Okay, here's the location. Next to a big briar patch, tall weeds, bedding area. That doesn't look that dense right now, but those briars will be really dense in the fall. This is March, mid-March. More pines up that way. I'm swinging around the tree. I'm up in the tree. When we come around the tree, there's a white oak over there. I don't know if you can see it very well, but that's a white oak. I'm in a white oak. So we've got feeding destination area right here. Got a swamp on one side, briars, brush on the other, dense briars. Got a creek over there. That's another little white oak. Got water over there. I think you can see it. I don't know if you can. Again, it's March, so we still got a little bit of snow in the swamp. But this is the kind of areas I like to hunt. Edges of bedding areas or interiors of bedding areas. Here's a beech tree. And typically right at the base of that beech tree, I don't know if you can see it, but that's normally a scrape right down underneath those branches. And then if we move around the tree, we've got a river. So I've got a shot to the edge of the river. Deer like following the edge of rivers. And that's the actual river. That other thing was a creek. And then there's more swamp on the other side. But the river continues on up through there, heads north. A maple tree right there, and then there's a continuation. Creek runs into the river. Anyway, I think you get the point. So this is a good little transition route coming down the edge of here and then coming to the river to cross the river or intercept does that went from one bedding area to the other, or does that cross the river out of the bedding area. It's just a good area for a lot of terrain features. This is a nice little spot. This is what I consider a terrain feature dump, because this is a specific type of bedding area. Again, briars and brush. This one's a specific type. You got cattails and tall marsh grasses. That one over there is all marsh grasses. You got the terrain feature of a river right here. This is a hard 90-degree bend. It goes due west that way, and then it turns 90 and goes north that way. So the deer coming down here, they skirt the outside edge of this, and I've got a shot to that river. Basically, all I got to do is swing around, and it's right there. Got a wide open shot right there. Obviously, I have a shot to the camera. Have a shot back here into the swamp. Shot down here. Got shots pretty much everywhere where a deer would possibly go, where it's not too dense, wherever there's a runway, I've got a shot. The only thing I do have to do when I get down is there's a scrape right underneath this beech tree, which still has the leaves on it. In fact, if you can pan that, walk over with the camera to that. I hunted in this tree one time last year and I saw 2 bucks. Neither one of them were 80 inches. One was a 1.5 years, one was a 2.5. But anyway, that's a scrape right there. It's usually there every year. And from this year, that that beech tree's grown a lot, so I have to clear some branches to get a shot to that. Other than that, this has remained relatively clean. So not a whole lot of stuff that needs to be taken out of here. I will, however, have my grandson tie my extension saw up and take out some of this stuff right here so that I do have a shot down here. This is starting to block this, and this is still going to have all summer to grow, so that's going to get longer and block it even more. So I need to get rid of this stuff. Okay, John, just a lot of Johns. My son's named John, my grandson's name's John. Everybody should, it's kind of like George Foreman. All his kids were George. Anyway, pulling up my Silky extension saw, which is absolutely the best extension saw you can buy, period, end of discussion. Clip those branches and this tree is done. Again, it's March 20th and won't be back here till during deer season. Thanks for watching another episode of Eberhart Outdoors, and please like and subscribe.